episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode with another fascinating guest today who is helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Chae, who is the co-founder and chief technology officer of a company called Brightseed, which is a novel life sciences company that's merging the tools of plant biology with artificial intelligence, ultimately with the goal of enabling a healthier future for us by sort of reconnecting, re-illuminating, and activating these connections between people and plants that have existed for thousands of years, but which we tend to forget about a little too much. Dr. Chae is a seasoned R&D technology developer. He's designed various advanced discovery methodologies for food tech, agricultural biotech, biomedicine, and the domain of synthetic biology. He's been a principal scientist of multiple discoveries, including machine learning driven discovery of novel nutritional bioactives from plants, also computationally guided identification of plant-based proteins for foods. With his Ph.D. in plant biology, computational and genomic biology from the University of California, Berkeley, he was also a founding member of the Quantitative Biosciences Institute. He did his postdoc research at the Carnegie Institution at Stanford. And prior to Brightseed, Dr. Chae served as the vice president of R&D at the Hampton Creek Company, which at the time was developing and marketing various plant-based alternatives to conventionally produced food products. So with that introduction, let's welcome Dr. Chae to our show today.
Hi, Ira. Thanks for having me, and happy to be here.
It's really great having you. This is a extremely exciting and interesting topic to me, having spent some time in the phytomedicinal space in the past. I'd love to start off as we typically do, though, just sort of by handing you the floor for a little bit to go into your background. If you could take us a little bit back to the beginning, everything from sort of where you grew up, how you developed your initial interest in science, in plant biology, and a bit of your career journey to date. I think that would be a great way to lay the ground for much of what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, happy to. I think for me, it all starts out, I think for a lot of us who are really kind of develop their careers around an idea or pursuit, but it starts for me very personally growing up. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, so my hometown's in Fresno. Actually, I was just down there over the weekend and just drove back up this morning, back up to San Francisco. And there, most of my family, most of my friends' families really were involved in farming and ranching. So, it was all around us, that was back in the 80s. So there are tons of orchards in the neighborhood, a lot of fields. You could drive a mile in any direction, you'd hit some sort of agricultural field, and really spent a lot of time also camping and fishing up in Yosemite and Kings Canyon and Sequoia. So kind of the natural world is very much a part of the environment that I grew up in, and what I came to appreciate about the area. And then I went away to school at Berkeley for undergrad, and kind of traveling back and forth between college and my folks' house for various holidays and summer times and breaks and such. You could see the change that was happening in the valley, really the change in the population, the reduction of arable land. So the kind of the buildup of the population centers down in Southern California and Northern California that was pushing a lot of pollution into the valley that would just get pinned up against the Sierras. So all these were creating really adverse conditions for plants. So I got very concerned with how are plants going to survive this? Both the plant stuff that we rely on as a food source or food security. The Central Valley produces, I think, almost 50% of the U.S. agricultural product on 1% of the growing land of the United States. So it's tremendously productive, tremendously relied on. What was going to happen to the capability of us to farm food for people with these changing conditions. I got worried about what's going to happen to all the wildlife out there, Yosemite and Kings and Sequoia with this change. So for me, it really led me to trying to understand plants, plant systems, and it's kind of what led me down the rabbit hole, was to try to understand how plants do what they do. And once I started studying plants, really this whole notion of the phenomena of plants really took hold. I think if you looked outside your window, you might see a tree. That tree, might be older than you are, and will probably outlive you by 2 or 3 times. How does this survive? And it's rooted in one place. So really, it kind of hard. Then I think once I started studying that in college, it really plants really captured my imagination. And I can go on the scientific side of that, how that general interest kind of converted into a scientific interest, and then it all kind of threads over to what I'm doing today. So we can dig into that too if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on such an important topic, because as we think of plants, and obviously food, calories and so forth, that's its own thing. Then we move into obviously the nutritional products, and then I love to point out, having spent time in the area, that the $1 trillion or so that we spend in the pharmaceutical industry every year, I mean, they owe. It's an industry that we forget owes its existence. It owes its existence to fungi and bacteria too, but for the most part, a large portion of that history is based on plants as well. And I like to point out to people that are unfamiliar with this space that, there's a lot of unknowns. And I think I've heard you talk about these in the past as well. Unknowns in the sense of, one, we as the scientific community have only investigated a small part of the hundreds of thousands of species that are out there. But additionally to that, plants, as you well know, they don't make simple chemistry. They make some really complex stuff when you get into the sugars and all the other modifications that the chemists aren't always great at doing. And the third, I'm sorry, this is a long-winded question, sort of the combinatorial nature of what we do find in that tree out there. It doesn't like to kill its germs with one antibiotic. It makes these combinatorial mixtures of stuff. With that all being said, sorry for taking the floor on this one. Talk a little bit about the range of these unknowns in the plant kingdom in 2021, and why we need tools like artificial intelligence and some of the other advanced techniques that you're talking about, and we'll get into those a little bit, in continuing and, as you say, sort of reactivating this area of research.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll start it on the scientific side and trace back down to kind of the phenomena of plant life itself. But I think I spent the better part of 15 years in academic research, really developing tools and approaches to understand this world of plant and the chemicals that they produce. And there's we produced over 100 different databases to date around different plants and all their the chemistries that are encoded in their genome, and the output of that, which are all the different chemicals that you might find in proteins, fibers, lipids, and this very vast and really intriguing world of plant small molecules. And after all that work, we were funded by the NSF. We had a great, fabulous team. We had consortia set up with academic groups around the world to help this effort. At the end of all that work, by the time I left, we'd still only uncovered or elucidated probably less than 1% of all the different plant biosynthetic chemical pathways that are out there. It is just that immense, this world of plant small molecules. And so for that reason alone, there's as a scientist, I can point to a number of orthogonal pieces of information. I mean, you're a scientist as well. You know that when you have a lot of different lines of evidence from different areas that all point to the same source, you've got something. So I think two very big pieces of information that I'll throw out there right now are one, and this is something that in your past. One, as you referred to, pharma has attempted to mine this area before. 2/3 of all of the small molecule FDA approved drugs are based on some type of natural products. Over half of those are generated by plants. So we know that there are things that plants produce, these small molecules, that are effective for helping humans with certain serious medical conditions. The second orthogonal piece is a really amazing study that was produced by the Lancet. It came out, I think, about 2 years ago, 2019, in the spring, and it was funded by the Gates Foundation. And what it did, it looked at over almost 30 years of data across, I think, 190, almost 200 countries, and it looked at the link between diet and death. And they found two things. One thing that they found was that 1 in 5 people are going to die a premature death because of their diet. And that's scary. If you look around the room and you see 5 people, one of them is going to die a premature death because of the way they eat. The surprise, and that was shocking, but it wasn't the most surprising thing in the study. The most surprising thing in the study was the second finding, that it wasn't so much what they were eating, like the fats, the sugars. It was actually what they were not eating, and it was the absence of plants in their diet. If you don't eat plants in your diet, you are 3 times more likely to die a premature death than if you were to eat the fatty meats, fried meats, and sugars and things of that nature, what we consider a bad diet. So that's really shocking. So the question there from a scientific perspective is, what is in those plants that are allowing us to survive, live longer, and live a more healthy life? So there's something fundamentally there, and combining that information with the pharma track record of making discovery of important drugs in that small molecule space leads me as a scientist to say, hey, it is those small molecules that are actually driving human health. Now, how do we find out what is the diversity of those chemicals? Which areas of health do they apply to? It's a massive, big space problem, and that's exactly where you want to apply the tools that we have today, and that's kind of high throughput data generation, large scale computing resources, and now the last bit that's come in over the last decade or so, which is AI and the ability to have algorithms that can learn and really make insights and deeply into phenomena that no one human can make, and do it at a scale and a speed that no team of humans can do.
And continuing along that, you've developed this platform. It's known as the Forager. Talk, obviously nothing confidential, but could you just take us a little? Actually, first, if you just talk about Brightseed, sort of a little bit of the history and how you went about setting it up. I know you raised something like $30 million recently, and then what do you put into Forager? As you were just mentioning, there's a century of natural products research alone just sort of sitting there. Are you sort of taking some of the sort of the existing data that we have and sort of merging together with sort of the new knowledge of in silico receptors and all this, or are you actually expanding beyond that and saying, wow, let's go out and do some of that sort of bioprospecting that we used to do in the old days, and try to capture some of that new data as well and throw it in there from the rainforest or wherever that all these folks live?
Yeah. Happy to answer that. Let me start off this way. I think kind of the previous generation or version of what you would call natural product discovery, or what pharma would call natural product discovery. We think about it under the paradigm as it was the grind and find, right? So you just go out, find the most esoteric plants, or you have some kind of information on some mammalian species is subsisting off of this thing. Let's grind it. Let's put it through some assays to see if it has any activity. And what we like to think about today, what today's technology that we've compiled from a diversity of different scientific disciplines, put it together under the hood of Forager. We like to consider it, instead of this random walk through nature, what we're doing is an intelligent guided search through nature. And so I would say, so in order to do this, kind of our fundamental working hypothesis, and I'll use an analogy. If you think of human health as, it is kind of the ultimate black box, right? Are the systems that truly wire the human body. And so if you think of it as a black box, it's filled with a lot of passages. In many cases, there are tons of locked doors inside this black box of ours. What we think about out there in the plant world is that here are some natural solutions out there. So we think about the diversity of plant chemicals, the things that we've co-evolved with, that black box has co-evolved on our diet. Yeah. So we think a priori and with the evidence that I talked to you about before, that there are tons of natural keys out there that plants provide that allow us to unlock those kind of clogged doors in the black box. So what we think is that in terms of data, like that black box has been really well studied for centuries, by medicine and lately modern medicine and pharma. So what we want to do is take like the best of the information around the black box, because we ourselves don't want to be probing into trying to find new doors that then we try to unlock. There's plenty of locked doors already that we still need to solve, right? Yeah. And so we just want to take the data for that, and for that, that's human biomedical data, pharmacologic data, what have you. And what we want to work with is highly vetted data that allows us to understand what are those locked doors, what passages do they belong to, et cetera. So for us, we want to de-risk the human health side and really look at, okay, what are the problems that have yet to be solved? What we bring to the table with Forages, like we have, like I mentioned, that less than 1% of all plant pathways have been elucidated. So we have a very, very shallow sampling of the natural keys that are out there. And already in that small sampling, we've already produced tons of solutions. We have, metformin, we have Taxol, we have aspirin, things that all came from plants in the natural world. So what if we were to blow open that solution space and really map all those natural keys that are out there? The chances are, with a bigger sampling of that space, we're going to find many more solutions to doors that are still locked in the human black box of health. And so that is what we put a concerted effort into developing the technologies and approaches that allow us to generate that, what we call kind of the natural solution space. And so that is all proprietary data. It's a combination of chemistry, biology, computation, plant biology. We do raw materials processing because we actually physically source plants from around the world. There's actually an article coming out on one of our plant sourcing specialists in Nature. I don't know when that article comes out, but we bring these plants into the company, into the R&D center. We generate data. Sorry. Awesome. Yep, self-care time. So
no problem.
We bring those plants in. We actually run them through physical processes, chemical processes to acquire data on these plants, and then that's what allows us to then map into that space of the natural solutions.
Outstanding. And I read that you're developing some of your own proprietary materials. I think I read something about metabolic health, maybe fatty liver disease, but then also you did a deal recently with Danone over in France. Just talk a little bit about sort of the strategy in terms of, obviously sort of similar to any biotech company. There's some stuff that we work on in-house, other things we partner with big pharma and so forth. Are you focusing both on consumer packaged goods and pharma? Are you purely CPG at this point? Once again, nothing confidential, but anything you can talk about a little bit of the health strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we are firmly grounded on a purpose or a mission for the company, and the idea is that Brightseed, what we do is we illuminate kind of the hidden connections between plants and humans to enable a healthier future. Yep. So in order to do that, the outlet for a healthier future, we think of health as a continuum. So on one hand, you have folks who are unfortunately in a bad state, and where they require an intervention. if we have a natural solution, a key that unlocks a door that has not previously been unlocked before in human health, what we want to do is make that as widely available to people. In the case of fatty liver, there is no therapeutic for that. So if you can find something that helps address that condition, it is a moral mandate to try to deliver it to people who are, people are dying every day because of that, and there is no solution. However, if you think about that continuum, the ideal scenario is that people never get into that state, right? And that is the fundamental basis of chronic disease, right? Chronic disease is really something that is driven by diet, lack of exercise, and smoking. And the idea is that if you can push more people on the spectrum, on the continuum to the healthier side, then you would never have to get there. And what do you do for those folks? You allow them to live a healthier life by providing them with solutions, either through food or supplements or over the counter, some way deliver these healthy products, further up on the continuum. So so with that idea in mind, the way we partner with industry is across these different segments. So we can partner with pharma if we're trying to find something that will allow the development of a therapeutic as an intervention for something that hasn't been solved yet, or comes with tremendous side effects and we're trying to avoid, all the way upstream to those progressive food companies that are thinking about food as a vehicle for health. And really it's intriguing because if you think about it, what product has the greatest user base in the world? And surprisingly, it's not Twitter or Gmail, but it's actually food, right? Food's got the bigger, and so the type of impact you can have, particularly for a small company where we're just trying to inject some innovation and new discoveries into the market to really impact people's lives. And our mandate is to enable a healthier future. How do you do it? You partner with companies that are great at doing what they do. It could be manufacturing, it could be distribution, it could be handling, certain consumer segments that are very disadvantaged. So you partner with those to have the biggest impact you can possibly have. And so for those companies are multipliers.
Yep, absolutely. And thinking of those, obviously you point out extremely large industries in terms of food, in terms of nutrition, in terms of pharma. The other thing that sort of from my past I remember that plants are really good at is keeping other plants away from them and keeping insects away from them. And the ag chem space is, as you know, it's another huge area.
Right.
And people, just like we're concerned about the foods we ingest, the nutrients and so forth, we're also concerned about what's on them. Any interesting research in terms of ag chem developing novel sort of biopesticides, bioherbicides to replace all the other nasty stuff that typically gets dumped on our plant foods to protect them?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say that's a little bit further out the way. So we do have thoughts on kind of the sequence of areas that we can go into. Ag is definitely something that we're talking about and have strategized about and talking to some players in the space. If you think about it, there are many needs around the ag industry, and this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is near and dear to my heart, given where I grew up. One of the things that we're thinking about, that the ways that we can impact ag, is the fact that, as you mentioned, usually when you think about a food crop, essentially they're thought of as commodities. So what are those traits that you try to really optimize for in those crops? And as you mentioned, disease resistance is one. The pathogenesis is huge, so you want to increase yield that way, but also the basic yield. So how much of the food stuff in that crop that you actually produce in a given planting is the other one. So they're very focused on yield and disease resistance. So for us, the way we think about the discoveries that we're making, we're linking particular plants to human health with the underlying insight of kind of the molecular what are the molecular characteristics that are really enabling that connection? That, you know, that's the data, that's what supports this evidence. So if you think about it from that light, what we're actually doing is we're discovering, and these are, you know, natural molecules produced by the plant, by the genomes that are encoded there in a given food crop. So what we're actually doing is actually uncovering a new high value trait. So if you can grow a crop, say it's soy, that is really optimized for a certain bioactive, and this bioactive or set of bioactives, and we talked about the complexity of plants that are out there. It's really kind of combination of molecules that can affect an area of health in a holistic fashion. So maybe, you know, multiple pathways or multiple targets coming from a pharmaceutical standpoint. What you're actually doing is identifying, you're bringing new value to a crop, and you're actually allowing that crop to connect to consumers who need that innovation or need that insight on a very different level than just kind of a commodity crop. And so because of that, and plants are so diverse, you mentioned there's, you know, there are 450,000 extant plant species that we know of. So you could probably multiply that to get all the ones we don't know about. And then you multiply that by the different varieties and the different ecotypes, and kind of the natural potential for these novel bioactives to be encoded in these plants and produced by these plants is massive. So what you're doing is that you can say that for, say there's soy, say there's another plant like cassava, you know, which is, you know, grown heavily in Africa as a foodstuff. What if we find something there? Maybe what that will do is encourage us to encourage the ag industry to plant and grow a more diverse set of crops. And in that way, you create, you know, a bigger toolkit for ag. It opens up a lot of options in terms of regenerative agriculture, you know, more sustainable agricultural practices, but you're also giving farmers new high value crops to work with, because there's a market on the consumer end for foodstuffs that are inherently more healthy, that are intuitively, you know, healthy to them. So we think that's an area that we can work with ag in, and hopefully on a kind of like the higher level. And this, you know, is, you know, the idea of like being able to encourage biodiversity and the growing of a diverse set of crops for multiple different reasons. We hope there's a connection there.
Very exciting. Very exciting. I wanted to ask you if you could talk for a few minutes. I read a paper that you were involved in, I think it was last year. It was in Advances in Nutrition. It was called Perspective, Guiding Principles for the Implementation of Personalized Nutrition Approaches that Benefit Health and Function. And, you know, this is, you know, another one of those topics that's sort of near and dear to me, sort of the nutrigenomics, the sort of the personalization. We see a lot of it in pharma now, but really, you know, if there's any place for it, or a place that it cries out, it's in this area, because we are such a heterogenic bunch. What I eat may benefit my glucose differently than yours, and sort of these themes of pharmacogenomics, toxicogenomics, and so forth. Talk for a little bit about just, I know this is sort of slightly separate from Brightseed, but it's an extremely important theme, I think. Talk a little bit about your perspectives and thoughts with regard to personalized nutrition, nutrigenomics, and where we're going in this particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not so far from Brightseed and what we're trying to do, because the whole idea around personalized health really fits in with the mission that I described, and allowing us to access plants and understand plants and how that can connect to humans and human health on the personalized level is a hypothesis that we have on the table that we're trying to prove out. And the idea, you know, here is that, like you said, we're all different. Usually when you get, like, say, the dietary guidelines from that the USDA puts out every 5 years or so, you're getting recommendations on the population level, and so they're really broad, and while overall, yes, they what they do is promote kind of a good recommendation on a healthy diet for most folks, But when you get like statistics, when you get to the individual, things can change, right, from the population. So the idea is that we're entering an era of science where we're getting more and more detailed information on people, on humans. You have 23andMe, which has been around for a while now, if you think about it, allowing personalized genomic information, which is was crazy to think about when I first started training as a scientist, but now it's out there. So we have that type of information. We're also entering an era of high tech where we're able to get more information directly from our body. So if you think about something like the Apple Watch and glucose sensors, being able to know your blood sugar levels. There are apps out there around sleep. You can track your sleep patterns and break it down into different variables about what's correlating with what, or what might be contributing to certain good or bad sleep patterns that you're experiencing. The level of personalized information is it's becoming commonplace, right? At home, like on I don't know if you use Netflix or Amazon, but you're getting personalized recommendations on what to watch and what to buy. So there's this whole, I think as a culture, the data are starting to be there on the human side for you to get personalized recommendations. What's lacking really is on the input side, if you think about it. So in terms of personalized nutrition. So there, what we're seeing is that we have just these very broad views of a diet. It's protein, it's certain oils, it's nuts and grains, it's kale. And so the level of personalization of the input to match the person, it's not keeping pace. So anyone could tell you eat 7 pounds of kale a day, but that's just not tractable. And is that even really, really good? What is it in that diet that you're trying to address for that person? So where there needs to be innovation in this space is on the input side. It's really understanding what is in our diet and what is driving which health condition, or what is contributing to what health outcomes. And for us, we think that the data sets that we're generating with Forager, that view of plants at the molecular level across a very broad set of bioactives, will allow us to then to understand, if there is a correlation, and then make very detailed recommendations for people in terms of matching up with where the field is going. And that's really personal genomics, understanding what's discriminative about the genomics in terms how does that map back to pathways in the body, and how does that map to outcomes in health. As that field is going, the idea is to match the input side to that. Is there any correlation from the input side to that outcome? And if you can make that link, then you enable a world of personalized health. And health, again, on the continuum, upstream on what we feed our bodies, versus kind of what we give it when now we're in a very serious a state of health and we need a heavy intervention.
Yeah. Before I get to the wrap-up question, there's just one other thing I want to bring up, because you brought it up earlier, and I don't know if you're working in it or not, but you did mention actually a couple of times that there's a lot of parts of the plant kingdom that live much longer than we do. Bristlecone pine, thousands of years.
Yeah.
I know you're sort of looking at some therapeutic targets. Because we touch on aging a lot on the show, and sort of the evolving area of the longevity biotech space. Is aging, just from a perspective of the biology of aging, a target of yours at all? And because there are some really interesting clues. Obviously, we're not trees, but we have certain similarities. Any interesting aging insights, or is that something you're not really? That's later on in the strategic plan.
Yeah, I would say a little bit more towards the latter, but it's very intriguing to us because we have had discussions around it. Because if you think about longevity, there's so much research around diet and longevity.
Right.
So the natural question is there a molecular basis for it? Is there something in our diet that's allowing us to live longer? And I think some of the fundamental advances that are being made in aging, things that Elizabeth Blackburn, people are starting to kind of open up
Right.
some look into the black box around aging.
Mm-hmm.
These are just they're molecules or molecular pathways in the human body that support processes that we all rely on to live off of. If those pathways can be modulated or affected by diet, then you think that there's a chance that you might be able to find something dietary that will allow us to affect longevity. For sure, we are very interested in increasing the health span. So it's that portion of life that you live a very healthy life, and that is, incontrovertible that diet plays a major role in it. And again, not gross level diet, just eat more kale. It's like, again, something in the molecules that are at the molecular level that's actually allowing that. Mentioned the site about premature death and not eating plants. You flip that around and you eat more plants and you reduce your chances of dying young, ergo, you'll likely live longer. So there's something there, and whether we put that down squarely as a strategic target to go after, we haven't yet, but we've had the discussions.
Very cool. Coming back to you, just looking at, you have an amazing team at Brightseed with all sorts of backgrounds. Your board of advisors, folks like Indra Nooyi, the former chairman of Pepsi.
Mm-hmm.
You have Walter Robb of Whole Foods. You really a lot of people from all angles in terms of health, in terms of the food space. Take some time just to, obviously in your own career and in your path to date, you've met a range of people like these from industry, from academia. Take a few minutes, if you would, just to mention, shout out to some of the other important influencers, mentors, as you have developed throughout your career that have been really influential in sort of keeping you on this path, keeping you with these interests and these goals.
Yeah. Just personally, I think that that's a good question. I think early on, just the ability to get exposed to the natural world through folks, through friends and the family farms like the O'Neills, and also through my folks who allowed me to, as a young kid, be able to go into the backcountry, with just a couple other guys at an early age for 5 or 6 or 7 days at a time, and then come back. Clearly, that amount of freedom and liberty to explore the natural world is very formative. I would say that scientifically, there's a few folks like at Berkeley, Cheng Luan and Sandrine Dudois, who they're one's a plant physiologist and molecular biologist, the other one's a biostatistics professor. And really that symbolizes something for me. It's like the coming together of these two different areas in order to allow for a new type of scientific approach to take place. And that's the combination of like AI and machine learning and hardcore quantitative methods, very data-driven methods, large-scale data-driven methods, to bench what was previously very solo bench type pursuit in molecular biology and genetics. Really, open the doors for what we, again, it's a similar theme. It allowed me to play in a number of spaces and really get exposed to different ideas and try to bring them together, which is what I've done ever since my formal training at Berkeley. And then I think Dr. Sue Rhee at the Carnegie, she had established a really great framework around data and building out large data sets all around plants. And so to go into a place that had a lot of data, whereas before we were just, this is right when genome sequencing was happening. Like we just did the first assemblies of the human genome. So the whole idea of big data entering the biology space was starting to happen, and she was at a place that had a lot of data and a lot of collaborations around the world with academic institutes that were generating unique types of data on different plants. That gave me that was kind of like, I got the tools at Berkeley, or the training at Berkeley. When I walked into there, that became an open playground to try if we can really leverage this data, not just to do something, but really to produce an insight. You know, that is what it's all about. It's answering a question or producing knowledge where there was none. And that in some way advances the field, or in the case of Brightseed, advances human health in some way or another. So those are some pretty formative influences. And then on the scientific side, but going to the business side is a whole other matter, because then you have one piece of the puzzle with the science, but then you actually have to turn it into a business. And it's the ultimate arena. Like, if you're not generating value, you won't survive. And so you really have to think about it with a different lens. And there, like Jim Flatt and Sophia Elizondo, my co-founders, are probably my greatest influencers and inspiration, because they're both, Jim's like the combination of scientist and business person, and Sophia is as sharp as they come when it comes to business. So it's really kind of studying under them on the business side to really understand how can we use technology to do something of value and actually execute on it. And then we've had tons of great support with backers like Chuck Templeton at S2G. He was the leader of I think OpenTable and Grubhub. Bart Swanson's from Horizons. Horizons Ventures is a fantastic VC outfit that really supported so many young companies in the high tech space, things like Dropbox and Spotify and Zoom, but really believes in kind of the human condition. So to take a leap of faith with us and kind of go on the long journey around human health, which is much different than downloading software from the internet, surviving as a business. Yeah. And I think the last group is Continental Grain. They were early friends of ours, and they were, formerly, really great, super successful commodities, company out of New York that, recently converted over, or maybe not so recently, over to investment. And they are people who are very connected into the food world, into the ag world, supply chain world, and their support, their vision for how human health can actually be a part of that, can affect the supply chain, can affect ag, and seeing that vision and supporting us from that. It's been really, really, important in terms of lending us credibility as a tiny little San Francisco company.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey, and you definitely have put all the pieces together. And I'm really, as I said at the beginning, this is a space that's been near and dear to me, and I'm rooting for you and really wishing you the best with all of this. It's really fascinating. For everybody that's going to be watching this particular episode on the YouTube channel or listening on the podcast, you've been spending time with Dr. Lee Chae, co-founder and chief technology officer at Brightseed, as they say, enabling a healthier future, reconnecting and reactivating this the relationship between humans and plants. Lee, it's been a great time talking to you and learning about everything you're doing. As I said, I'm wishing you the best with it. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Thank you for everything you're doing there. And as we used to say on the show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow through reconnecting us all with the plant kingdom. It's really very inspiring stuff, and wishing you the best with it.
Thanks, Ira. It's really a great endorsement, and always happy to talk about science too. So it's really fun having this discussion.
Thanks so much for joining us.